Good evening and welcome to Athens City Council. Tonight we have committee meetings. We're going to lead off with the Committee of the Whole. And our discussion will be of Title 39, the Wellhead Protection Plan, and we're going to have an update. I'll turn to Councilmember Crowell for this discussion.
Thank you, Madam President. At the request of City Service Director Andy Stone, I met with Mike Cooper of the Athens City County Health Department regarding our wellhead protection plan, otherwise known as Title 39 of the Code of Ordinances. There had been a recent spill in the wellhead protection zone, and at that time, the wellhead protection team realized that our language in the ordinance could be a little bit more upfront about the requirements for reporting of a spill. So I met with the wellhead protection team. I met with Mike Cooper a few times, and he proposed some language to update the title. I took that language to the Environmental and Sustainability Commission. We reviewed that, and we also took a look at the entire code. We had no other recommended changes from the Environmental and Sustainability Commission, except what Mr. Stone and Mr. Cooper had recommended. It simply slightly rewords the requirement to immediately report a spill, and it actually moves it up about 8 pages. So it appears at the beginning of the ordinance instead of sort of buried a little bit more deeply. It still will remain, if accepted, in that original location on about page 12 of the title, but it will be moved up. The language is slightly changed. It used to read, any spills of fertilizers, pesticides, and/or regulated substances must be reported to the administering authority immediately upon detection of the spill. And the recommended adjustment of that language is any spills of regulated substances, including but not limited to pesticides and fertilizers, shall be reported to the administering authority immediately upon detection of the spill. So this proposed change simply takes this language and moves it higher up in a more immediately recognizable section of the code, and it also slightly changes that language and repeats it where it originally was lower down in the code. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions? Yes, Councilmember Fall.
Thank you. We do have the chapter that regulates fracking and injection waste. And I want to make sure that the language that we have in the wellhead protection with this particular probably strengthens it, because there's more regulation required under our chapter 49, I think it is. And there's more stringent requirement for reporting and putting in information when people go forward with state, the state activities, the activities that the state has deemed that we cannot regulate by banning. And so I want to make sure that the overlay makes sense. And thank you.
And any other comments or questions from council? Mayor Patterson.
Just to kind of follow up on what Member Crowell was talking about, there's a couple other grammatical changes that we identified going through the process. And then there was another change, although not significant, but it's under 390107. I believe it is section C2, where the language has changed there. Any spills of regulated substances, including but not limited to pesticides and then it goes on with its regular text, fertilizers, shall be reported to the administering authority immediately upon detection of the spill. So again, this is a lot of needed clarification and cleanup of language within this particular piece of legislation.
Any other comments? Okay. And any comments or questions from the audience? Okay. Then we'll move on to the Planning and Development Committee, and this is chaired by Councilmember Fall. with council members Reisner and Grace.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Tonight we have actually 2 agenda items because I'm going to ask that Hillcrest Drive be put on the table for further down the way. First is the East Park Drive, establishing a right-of-way. This area, otherwise known as over by the community center, all the road over that way, has some interesting historical affects that make it for its particularly challenging planning and permitting area. So what's been brought forward is to develop a right-of-way where there is not one currently there. And since it's so complicated and has interesting history, you can talk about it, Mayor. Thank you.
That's okay.
But we have been looked at this, and it's in order to, the right-of-way is a little different than of the other areas in that it doesn't necessarily follow the road as much as we like right-of-ways to, and some of the other changes so that it will be a unique right-of-way in our city because of the historic roads and right-of-ways that are in this area. So you want to say more? Thank you.
No, just other than this needs to be a dedicated road and to have this right-of-way cleaned up.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any maps available? I don't see any on our shared drive here. I see the memo, but
Right.
I can certainly get you maps, absolutely.
yeah, because
there's
I'm having a hard time visualizing a right-of-way that's not following
a large map here.
a large map. Oh, I like big maps.
I like big maps. So if people want other questions?
I'd like to look at the map too.
Right. So I think that maybe when we bring this forward to council, the maps, and then also maybe a frequently asked questions sheet would be nice about this. Also with some of the weird things that we've found out about this area and the airport that was there. So any other questions besides being able to look at maps? And it will, these maps will be on the back table in Debbie's office for other members of council. So any other, so that's more information to come forward, and we'll go with this in the coming weeks. Great, thank you. And the second is Title 29, which has to do with housing code and such. And this has been put forward by the Code Office of Code Director. Sorry, I'm spacing on the name. And this is cleanup of the language about water heaters. Right now, water heaters has language under it which is overly restrictive and puts the onus on the city to make sure that the installation of the water heater is followed. So what we want to do is change the regulation language to follow the instructions for each individual water heater. Because now there's so many different water heaters on the market, there's all sorts of different requirements. Mayor?
And let me share with you, Member Fall, unless you're going to get to this, this is important to note that, the 2015 International Plumbing Code and the 2011 Ohio Plumbing Code 502.1 general water heaters must be installed in accordance with manufacturer's instructions. And that's what the Director for Code Enforcement would like that language to be changed to, as opposed to what it says now, which is all water heaters must be installed by licensed plumbers. Basically, this is saying the same thing, but again, it's following the International Plumbing Code and Ohio's Plumbing Code.
Questions?
Okay, did I hear that right? Right now, the code says installed by a licensed plumber, but if we change it, that goes to manufacturer's instructions. So that means I could install it if I follow the instructions.
It would change to the International Plumbing Code and the Ohio Plumbing Code. So
So as long
it
as
follows.
so if I follow the code as the homeowner or property owner, I don't need to call a plumber a licensed plumber. So you're really hoping I do a good job.
Well, I would hope so because it's your house. You know.
That doesn't necessarily follow in my case.
Right. Well.
Let me share with you,
I feel more comfortable with the licensed plumber doing the job.
Right, but it's right.
Following the manufacturer's instructions.
Yes.
Director Soroy sent me a screenshot of what one would likely find inside the instructions for installing a water heater. And it basically says this manual, read this manual and the labels on the water heater before you install, operate, or service it. If you have difficulty following the directions or are not sure, you can safely and properly do this yourself, do this work yourself. Then it says you contact so-and-so, find a qualified person to install this for you. And then there's another screenshot in here, if you'll give me a moment. It says, read each installation step and decide whether you have the necessary skills to install the water heater. Only proceed if you can safely perform this work. If you cannot or are not comfortable, have a qualified person perform the installation. And that's what comes with a new 2018 water heater.
Right. What's wrong with what we have right now?
I think that the code director thinks that it's over.
It's putting too much of a burden on the code office?
Yeah.
Well, I would just say that I think it would be nearly impossible to enforce, to just say that all water heaters must be installed by a licensed plumber. There are many properties in town that have maintenance personnel that are entirely qualified to and have the skills and knowledge necessary to install a water heater, but are not necessarily licensed plumbers because that comes with additional testing and expense in order to obtain that license. Yeah. And water heaters go out at various times and generally need to be replaced very promptly. And so for the code office to be able to know when and who is installing every water heater in town, I don't think is realistically
You're supposed to
enforceable.
notify the code office that.
No, I think it's onerous on being able to enforce. And if the regulations under the state and other manufacturers says, so you have to look at enforcement and whether it can be enforced. And so if it's too hard or vague to be able to be enforced, then.
Well, that's, forgive me for belaboring a point, but I could make the same argument with stop signs at every intersection. I mean, there's not a policeman there to enforce it. You're hoping that everyone does, just simply because, well, it's the proper thing to do, it's a safe thing to do, but on the other hand, we do not enforce it because it's overwhelmingly impossible to do. Am I making sense?
Right. Not really. I mean, I think that what you're saying is true, but at the same time, why have so many books, laws on the books where it is difficult and not necessarily necessary to have that sort of law? I mean, there's no spitting on the sidewalks either. So.
Well, that's a very good law too.
Right. Well, but it's unenforceable. Unless you see that.
Unless you see it, but nonetheless the law exists. We don't repeal it because we say, well, it's unenforceable. There's a reason why we do that is to keep tuberculosis from becoming an epidemic again.
That wasn't a very good example on my part, obviously. I think this goes along with other updating and word changes in a lot of our code, and I'm more likely to listen to our code enforcement director about this because he knows to some degree, what makes sense and what's enforceable and what needs to be updated. And maybe it used to be that water heaters were super duper difficult to put in and that you could only use a plumber. But now with all the different updates in plumbing and everything, maybe they're not as rocket science as they used to be. And that's updating the laws as would make sense. So it doesn't keep you from hiring somebody who can do it.
It didn't 2 weeks ago.
So, is there people? Yep.
Hello there, Peter Katzis, 1 Bryan Road. I have 2 questions. So we have a contractor's license in the city, is that correct? So do the plumbers not need to be licensed?
They're contracting. Contractor's
Okay.
license.
So they also hold so it's not like a subcontractor. Like I think of a contractor more like a GC, a general contractor.
Well, it's like everybody from people who are doing lawn mowing and such, but it's more to do with tax purposes and not with enforcement purposes. And that section of the code has much more to do with taxes and income taxes and tax. So it doesn't, they don't follow bonding and those sort of issues.
Okay. And then the second one, this is going to get more into the weeds, but I just replaced my hot water tank in 2 buildings here recently, and at the time I was recommended to have an expansion tank installed, and that was per Athens City Code, was my understanding. So is that something then that the homeowner also needs to be aware of, that there are certain, I mean, I know that we probably can't speak to the expansion tanks tonight, but is that something that we could have Director Sorois respond to?
Sure.
That would be, I mean, I'd be curious about that, because I'm sure that those directions that are coming from the manufacturer might not be necessarily speaking to something that I thought that the city was requesting.
Right, but there are also increased requirements for rental properties. So when you're looking at rental properties, they're different than residential. There's less rigorous enforcement, or not enforcement, but regulations having to do, like we don't have building inspection when you do plumbing in your house. Some communities do. They have you do inspections after you do certain types of plumbing. We don't have that in Athens. So there's a difference there.
Correct, yeah, but I mean, the expansion tank made sense to me, so I did install it in my own home because I thought I mean, why wouldn't I have the same safety feature in my own home versus what I would have in a rental? Thank you.
Right. Thank you. So we could talk about this more next, we'll bring it up the next meeting, or maybe the next after.
I will certainly get you information on, accessories, i.e. expansion tanks, because my home has one too.
Right.
So I will follow up on that.
It's like buying a car.
I have
getting
one.
accessory.
I know that they are required for rentals within the city. It's a relatively recent change that as part of their annual inspections. It used to be that there was an overflow downspout, and now there's additionally the expansion tank required.
So. Well, and this is why we also look at periodically look at code so that we can update language and such. So, okay,
we can make recommendations as to safety in people's own homes. Like, it's best to follow manufacturer's instructions and have a smoke detector and carbon monoxide detector, but we can't necessarily require that of individuals in their own homes.
Right. So, great, thank you. And as I said earlier, Hillcrest Drive, I'm going to put on table it for right now. Thank you.
Short-term table.
Tableette.
Okay. Thank you very much. We'll have Transportation Committee now, and that's chaired by Councilmember Katsas and Council Members Grace and Crowell.
Okay, are we ready? Okay. There are three bullet points that we have this evening on transportation, and the first one that we're going to speak to tonight is the Ayuba Trick or Treat, which is the Athens Uptown Business Owners or Business Association. Their trick or treat that they do. It usually has a street closure, but I would say at this point I haven't heard of anything. I don't know if administration has received any word about when this may be, or if
the timing of
timing. Yep. Or
Member Katsas, you asked me too quickly.
wait. We've got it here. I see Monday, October.
I can certainly get that information for you.
We have Monday, October 29th from 6 to 7:30 p.m. and that's on the Visitors Bureau site. But are they requesting? I mean, we decided to put this on here because we felt like it was time, but we hadn't necessarily heard anything yet.
Last year, if I'm not mistaken, I know we really trimmed down the street closure time so as to not impact the businesses in the uptown area with this particular event. It was, I think we closed the street. Again, I'm going purely by memory, Member Katsas. But I believe it was, 4 or 5 p.m. to where we closed things down.
The last ordinance said 6 to 7:30.
Was the event itself, or was that the street closure?
That was a street closure, 6 to 7:30.
Okay. But in order to do that, we have to bag the meters and give people time to clear their vehicles out. I'll get more information for you, Member Katsas, on the timing of this.
All right, good.
We have an Ayuba meeting this Wednesday morning, but I won't wait till Wednesday morning to get clarity on this.
And really at this point with that date, that's after the big Halloween event.
It is.
So
it is, which is the 27th.
Yep. So I'd almost believe. I feel like a lot of the businesses that, not everybody's up there to serve Halloween, but we had some requests from people that this was their season, and so having that time frame being closed was impacting a heavy part of their seasonal business. So I would think that at least that issue would evaporate just with the date.
Oh, you're correct, a little bit, because I believe if it wasn't last year, it was the year before. It may have likely been last year where the Yuba Uptown trick-or-treating was before, and therefore it would have impacted things like costume sales or other things going on, people prepping. So sure, this flips it around this year. Okay,
all right. So the second thing we're going to speak to tonight is the pilot program for the residential parking permit, and I did see that Joan Kranansky did walk in here, and I know that she would like to say a few things about this. So please, if you'd like. I forgot to ask if anybody had any questions about the Ayuba.
Well, she's coming up. Were there any questions?
No. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
That's fine.
Thank you.
My name is Joan Kranansky, and I reside at 56 Mile Street in Athens. And I want to thank Councilmember Costas for bringing this up. I did send out an email a week or so ago because it was on my mind, and I know coming towards the end of the year when the pilot project could conceivably expire, and I hadn't done it soon enough, I would be very sad. So would a few other people. So what I would like to say is everyone I've spoken to has felt much more comfortable in their lives as residents on streets without or with limited off-street parking because of the 72-hour parking permit. I think a few people have emailed and or spoken to Councilmember Costas. Myself personally, I'm greatly relieved. No longer every day do I have to think about going up and checking my car and moving it. So it's made my life much easier. Some people had discussed with me about extending the project either time-wise for the permit or in geographical area. But I think if we just continue it for a year and use this year to think about and discuss those ideas, because the first year we were able to establish the administrative and enforcement procedures that once they were established, I think worked very well. Even to the point when I purchased a new car and had to go down to the Athens Police Department to change my vehicle type. It took 5 minutes. I mean, they had to process the administrator that sits at the front desk was just slick, and check with the code office to make sure, because it's a two-tiered administrative process, code office and police department, and in 5 minutes they had no problem. I updated their database and it was done. So even a situation like that went smoothly once they had everything in place. So anyways, I guess I would suggest that we continue this as a pilot project for another year and devote this year into looking at the possibilities of how it might or might not be expanded in terms of being a satisfied customer. I am a very satisfied customer, and I want to thank Council and the Mayor for moving this forward and approving it. Anybody have any questions?
I'll open up the floor before I have any. Mayor?
I don't have a question. I do have a comment to follow on with Ms. Kronansky, and that is that I spoke to Captain Harvey about this and about his take on the successfulness of this pilot to this point in time, and he feels that it is a very manageable pilot and that there's been a lot of positive results from this. I will share that it's interesting. There have been individuals cited, so parking enforcement is tracking the 72-hour permits to make sure that they are being moved, within 72 hours. They're not staying longer than what is allotted. The interesting thing is that the citations have come from vehicles that were multiply cited under the old 24-hour rule. So sometimes behaviors don't change a whole lot. However, I will share that I too believe that it is very successful and would like to also encourage council to consider continuing on for another year. As we look to see, I believe there's been 12 permits at this point in time that have been issued. I've heard from a number of them as well who said that they appreciate the relief with the limited or no parking that they have. So that's my 2 cents, Council.
And I would like to mention that I did receive at least 2, maybe three letters in support of this project, and then I also had a citizen track me down today, which isn't always the easiest thing to do, but they found me and also expressed support for this project. I think that with the volumes of permits that have gone out, that I would love to see a little bit more data collected and just kind of see how if it continues to organically grow and if there's any other problems that get presented there. But like I mentioned to you, Joan, on the phone conversation last week, I'm really happy that a citizen group came together and put this together and came forward with a solution to a problem that you were experiencing in your neighborhood. So it's nice to have that help here. So I want to thank you and everybody that worked on this.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm sorry. I was waiting for someone to say something else. Okay, so this is going to be a very quick one. This is the Richland Avenue Pedestrian Passageway Project. This is Project 311. This is just some housekeeping. There is an LPA agreement that the city needs to ink with ODOT for construction of this project, and so basically this is something that we need to have in that package to take out to bid. So we will be asking for a suspension of this, but really it's just the allowing ODOT to come into the city limits and work on this project. And just to remind everybody, the total project cost is a little bit over $3 million. It's $3,098,459. And from the Transportation Alternative Program, it's a federal funding program. The share of that will be that the city will not have to pay is $1,812,195. So, any questions on this one? All right. With that, we are done with Transportation Committee.
Okay.
So thank you.
We'll move on to Finance and Personnel, and that's chaired by Councilmember Reisner with Council Members Butler and Crowell.
Thank you, Madam President. Just two bullet points for Finance and Personnel. The first one is to reduce the 2018 year-end appropriations. We're now in the second week of October. Our budget year will end on the 31st of December. We're at that stage where the various departments and offices within the city are reviewing their budgets, and leftover funds that have not yet been spent, that have been appropriated, will be returned back, if they're not spent, to the general funds or the various other funds that they come in, if they're proprietary or non-proprietary. So it's a year-end bookkeeping task that we need to do, and that way we'll know what financial condition we'll be in by, hopefully, when we get our budget together by, the first week in December, I think is our target, if I remember right.
It is. We are currently, and have been, meeting department by department and going through line item by line item in their budgets. And we're a ways in. We have a ways to go, but that's our target.
Okay. So if anyone has any comments on that, feel free to jump in. Well, last item, appropriations and transfers. I have here a list of items that our City Safety Director, Andy Stone, has given us. He'd like to appropriate $50,000 to the street fund for repairs of pavement and curb on Columbus Circle Drive, guardrails in various locations, vehicle maintenance for snowplows, winter weather preparation and leaf removal equipment. Appropriate $30,000 to the water fund for the restocking of repair parts for possible water breaks. Appropriate $10,000 to the sewer fund for the restocking repair parts and so on. And $20,000 for sewer televising. That's not as strange as it may seem. It's to use TV cameras to actually look inside the pipes to see if there's any issues there that, so we're forewarned about what may happen. And then lastly, appropriate $8,000 to the internal service fund to extend the city server hardware maintenance contract for 2 years. So we're looking at close to $100,000 there, and then so yeah. So we'll have an ordinance together probably next week. And anything on this list need to be suspended. I believe there was an emergency repair that they had to go to an outside contractor to help with. And there's a bill that's maybe coming due.
Is that the $8,000 that you're referring to?
No, that's for hardware maintenance contract. I guess I'll have to talk with the.
Well, we may be suspending.
Yeah, okay. I just want to be ready in case we have to do that, because this is October.
Right.
And we don't have much time left in the year. So that's why I have, unless there's any other appropriations,
Nope.
I can't think of any.
Okay. And we can get that clarified by next Monday night.
Right.
For what items it might need to be suspended. Okay. If that's the case, and no other comments or questions about Finance Committee items from council members or audience, then we'll consider the meeting adjourned at 7:35 p.m. And we'll meet in regular session next Monday, October 15th at 7. Thank you very much. Good night.